And we're live. Welcome, folks, to my first live stream for 2019. I'll just gonna go through a SteamVR using SteamVR input in Unreal Engine 4.21. I published an article yesterday in Medium. One second. All right. And yeah, sorry about that. Just checking if I'm getting audio out. Anyways, so we've got. I just wanted to go through a lot of the salient points in this article, and maybe it'll help out if I do a public and live demo about it. All right. So what we're going to be covering in this live stream is a little bit of the prerequisites before you enable SteamVR input in Unreal Engine 4.21. And how to actually enable it, what the engine behavior is after enabling it, and a few tips on how to get yourself out of trouble with it as well. And we're gonna cover knuckles, or enabling knuckles on it manually. So, all right, so let's get started, I guess. I've created a demo project here. It's just a fairly simple VR scene level. So I've created a simple pawn and just grabbed some of the animation blueprints that came with the VR template from the engine. So I'll just give this a go so you could see what it actually does. So all it is let me just get my left hand there. So if I press the trigger, it will just play the animation for the grab and put it back. So the animation blueprint that came with the SteamVR template is quite nice for this, because I wanted to cover both digital input and as well as the analog input for SteamVR input. Yes, SteamVR input system. So let me just do that and show you exactly what I mean. So for that to look like that, with the animation blueprint that came with the SteamVR template, you grab the animation instance and then just pipe it in, and then you need to set using the digital input of pressed and released. You could set a grip state to grab and open. So that's all I'm doing for that. And as well as every frame, get the axis value of the trigger and set the grip value there so that you'll play the animation. So maybe I should also show the animation quickly if it's here. Do it this way, be faster. It's already there. So you can see from here. So all I'm changing is this value and this grip state, just to make it look like that. Alrighty, so. Alright, so that's the very basic VR project that we're going to be working on for this live stream. I've also added a thumbstick debug value here. Basically all it does is spits out the axis values of the X and Y, just so that I can show you what the engine does when dealing with the thumbstick values, because it does something a little bit different, so you just need to be aware of once we enable the SteamVR input. All right, so that's the main project. So let's say you've got a project like this, and you actually don't use the type of abstraction, the action abstraction that Unreal Engine does, and you would like to migrate to the new SteamVR input system, which is also an action abstraction, an input abstraction for different controllers. So it's kind of like marrying this two is what we're about to do. But right here, doing a really bad practice, which is just getting the motion controller, which is an abstraction, but still not best practice, because you'd want this to be actually actions so that you could reassign the input controls. So let's just do that first. So if you go to settings, project settings, and you do engine input, you would see the action abstractions here. All right. So you've got action mappings. So the action mappings are the what we call the digital input, or the yes/no press released states. And let's create one for grab. And let's put in the motion controller left trigger. So I think it should do grab left, for example. I'm gonna do grab right, motion controller left, let's do a trigger. Alrighty, so that's for grabbing left and grabbing right. So you could add obviously more inputs here and then have them routed to the same action. Alright, and I'm gonna do the axis mappings now. What did I do there again? It's thumbstick. Alright, so what do we call this? Let's just call it thumbstick debug X. Right, and if I do that, let's do thumbstick. Let's use the left. Am I using the left there? Yep, left thumbstick X, and let's just copy these. Thumbstick Y. Alright, so I'm going to grab the X and Y values of the thumbsticks and map them to action, two different sets of actions. Okay, I'm going to show you how that translates later on the SteamVR input. So, and that should be pretty much it. Another thing you need to check, although it is on by default, is in the plugin settings and VR, just make sure that SteamVR is enabled, right? And once you've got that enabled, might as well disable the other VR frameworks if you're not going to be using it for this project. All right, so that should automatically be saved. And if I close, now we can safely enable SteamVR input, but right before we do that, I just want to show you a setting in SteamVR. So this is your SteamVR settings located in your program file, Steam config. So you can see this is how it looks like before enabling the SteamVR input. Okay. And if I close this one now, and I like closing SteamVR as well. So let's see. All right, so to enable SteamVR, the new SteamVR input, you could either do a change for within the engine, and then recompile it, or go to your config, open up your default engine.ini, and just there we go. And then just type the settings here. System settings. Set this block and the SteamVR system. SteamVR. SteamVR dot enable VR input equals to 1. And that should be it. So this setting with a really good misspell there, if you can spell it right, should be all you need to do to enable the new VR input, SteamVR input. So I've also listed that here. That's your second step. on the article that I published yesterday in Medium. So let me just go back to, where did I put that thing? There, all right. And now so once you've enabled that, it's just then a matter of opening up your project. So you have to make sure that you have the actions all set up. And I may just have forgotten one thing, but I'll open it up anyways. Alrighty, so I've forgotten to actually remap this to the new actions that we just created, which doesn't matter for now because we're not testing it yet, but let me just do that now. So we called it grab left and then grab right. So pressed and released. So we can safely remove that. And then trigger axis left. So what do they call it? Thumbstick debug. Yep. Debug X. Oops, sorry. Thumbstick debug. Thumbstick debug X. Oh, all right. So I've forgotten the trigger values for the axis mapping as well. But let me just, while I'm here, let me just grab that there, which I will pretend is intentional so I can show you how it's actually set up and the behavior of the engine during restarts. Let me just there. So I'm gonna do input axis thumbstick debug Y to replace that. And sorry. Alrighty, so we're still missing this part, this bits here. But let me just quickly show you what the engine actually does after enabling it. So with the new SteamVR input system, I'll quickly go to here. What it does is it enables you to do pretty much the same thing that you do with the Unreal Engine input abstraction. So we've set specific actions, we define our own actions, and then define within those actions, or we bind which controller inputs are related to specific input actions. So, and that's pretty much what the SteamVR input does as well. With the engine, for those of you already familiar, it does this by using that UI that we do we just did in the editor. And then if we open this up, it does this using this file called default_input.ini. So most devs with Unreal will be familiar with this file. And then obviously we edit that using settings, project settings, engine input here, right? And that goes to that default input.ini. With SteamVR input, where we're gonna get those values from would be two main files, all right? So let me just go to Livestream. So once you enable the SteamVR input, if you go to saved, once you reopen your project during start, it would generate what we call an action manifest, which is the first main file that the engine that the new SteamVR input system requires. So what is this action manifest, you ask? I'll open it up and we should see. So what it, at the gist of it, right? So you've got all of this files. It tells the SteamVR input system, it tells the system where to find what we call the controller profile input files. So I just call them controller bindings, but official Valve documentation calls it controller profile input files. So, but yeah, so all it does is it shows you the different inputs. So like default input.ini. So for each of the default input controllers, it has a separate JSON file that maps the values to a specific action. All right. And what those actions are defined, they're defined here. So this would be very familiar. Let me just see if I can zoom that in for you folks. All right, so you could see grab left is what we defined earlier. And then we defined grab right. And this is a tricky bit. It took me quite a bit of reading code to figure out what the engine was doing when I was creating Project Sunrock to automate the creation of these files here. Because the engine was, or is, so thumbstick debug, if we go back to where we've specified in the engine, that's how we call the axis mapping, right? So what it does is it adds x underscore axis and adds y underscore axis. So we have thumbstick debug x and thumbstick debug y, and then creates a vector. Since the SteamVR input system uses a vector too, like combines this two. So what the developers with Epic did is to automatically create an action for us with x and y, combining those x and y values. So once it finds out that you're doing x and y for the motion controller, once it figures that you're doing this, right, looks at those values, then it generates an underscore axis to the action for you. So that's what you're going to be looking for in the SteamVR input dashboard, which I'm going to be showing you earlier. That's where we're going to actually map certain values in. And then internally it gets split out to x and y values in here. All right, so that's one of the more esoteric behavior that it does. And saying that we've forgotten another action, right? So I've missed creating a vector1 action for the trigger. So let's just do that now. So we'll do a axis mapping, and we'll, what do we call that? Grab trigger. Not a really nice name, but okay. Grab trigger left, and then trigger motion controller left trigger axis. That's what I was looking for. And I'm just gonna create another one of that and call it grab trigger right, and call it motion controller left trigger, sorry, right trigger axis. Alrighty. So once that's done, since what controls the generation of these files, the action manifest, is an input controller, it needs to happen during startup. So I'm going to close the editor and just restart that. And we should see some changes here come up. So you can see it has added the grab trigger left axis in there and grab trigger right axis. So if you go to SteamVR settings as well, we should notice a change. I haven't played it yet, so it hasn't generated it yet. All right, so that's the action manifest, which is the first main file that we need to care about. Let me just go to this link here. Chapter 3, if I can click on it, apparently not. It's odd. Okay, now I'm in edit mode. All right, so that's the file here that I was discussing. And the other main file is what Valve calls input profile. And I'm calling it controller input profile binding files, or controller bindings for short. So these files are located somewhere else. So the idea, at least from the comments of the Epic developer, is that since the action manifest is auto-generated by the engine, it's going to be located in saved config, and that's your action manifest, SteamVR_actions.json. But since those input bindings themselves, they're going to be theoretically created by the developer of the application, it's placed under config. And it creates this folder here called SteamVR bindings, right? And auto-generates this file. So auto-generate is a bit generous for what it does, actually. Let me open Vive controller, for example, here. So that's all it does. It creates basically a stub of the actions, so it doesn't actually map any of these actions to the controller input, which is actually known by the engine here. So I'm guessing it's still an incomplete implementation from Epic, but it's missing that bit. But what we can do here is actually use the SteamVR input dashboard to create these mappings here. So if I go to, which is what I'm about to do now, if I go to devices, controller input binding, I'll do for editor. All right. Okay, so I haven't enabled my controllers. I'm going to enable my Vibe ones for this part of the live stream. Okay. And use that. All right, so this is what happens here. And let's say I wanted the trigger. We'll use it as a trigger. Use the click, and we use grab left, right? And then for the right, we could mirror it as well, but let me just not do that for now. And then for pull, we'll have the axis, grab trigger left axis, right over there. For the trackpad, do with the trackpad, we're going to use it as a trackpad position thumbstick debug XY _ axis to the, so that's the auto generated one by the engine, and that should be the mappings, at least for the left portion. I'll just double check if I missed something. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna save this as a personal binding for now, and you could grab the JSON file that gets generated from here in your Steam UGC, which is a convoluted way of doing it. Hence, what you could do is devices. You could also manually do it. I've set out the specifications in my article here if you want to do more fine-grained control, or if you're creating a tool for other developers and you want to auto-generate or help auto-generate these files. Yeah, so a bit of an understanding of what these values are can be found on the article. But I'm gonna cheat on this one. So you can go to settings and under developer, enable debugging options here. So with, if you've ever used Unity or opened the Unity SteamVR input plugin, this is automatically set up for you. So, but if you've never used the Unity on your machine, you might notice that you don't have this debugging option. So that's how to enable it there. Let's see if it enables it. If I do this, no, we need to actually close it. All right, devices. All right, so now as you can see here, I'd like to be able to see what this JSON file looks like. And so from this nothingness here, we have this. Let me just double check something before I do a copy paste. All right, so the action set is actions main. Grab that for us, and that's correct. So what you can do is just enable that input debug mode. And instead of trying to find where the UGC is for your app, for the editor, you could just grab this and go back to your Vive controller and just see what it's done. Actions main. Where does it go? Why doesn't it show me the whole thing? Okay, I'm pretty sure it should come in within the, just from memory, it should come in from to here. If it doesn't work, figure it out. What's going on there? So all right, so that should work. Should being the operative word. All right, so we have that Vive controller. And another thing while we're here is an input debugger there. You can see is you can see all your actions, and it should be pretty much live. So I'm pressing the trigger at the moment, and you can see the values. And another thing to note here, if you're confused on where, for example, with this one, right, this output here, oh sorry, this path, right, where do you get all the list of paths? I've listed some of the more common ones in my article, but my article also links to the Valve documentation. You could see a comprehensive list of these paths. You just kind of have to put them all together, or through all the documentation. It's not very clear, but an easy way of finding it out is obviously just having a look at the input debugger and having a look here. Some of the more interesting ones, all right, so I don't have my knuckles enabled, but I'll just show you that to you later in the live stream. So we've got all of those values, and we've got that mapped. But at the moment, this is saved as a personal binding. But what I really want to do is be able to make it the default binding for my application here. So if I go back, let me just see if I've saved that. Yeah. So at least for the Vive controllers, if I click the default bindings, now that I've pasted that section there, here, it should automatically pick that up. So you can see here, and I'll select this binding now, and I'll be back to the default bindings. I could get rid of this if I wanted to, for example. So you could do it this way. So it's a little bit roundabout, in my opinion, to do it this way. What would be ideal is obviously the engine should just automatically generate those files for you, which a bit of plugging, I guess, sorry about that. Oops, why am I on this thing? All right, so which is for this plugin that I made, I've actually pulled the engine, some parts of the engine code, and brought it down to the project level, so that and then it overrides the default behavior of the engine and does generate those input binding files for you. But this is all right. But this is just to show you how you could do it if you were doing it manually. So, and that's how I used to do it when when I got the first knuckle, my first knuckles, and just trying to figure out how the engine was doing it, and how to basically just use the knuckles with the new system. All right. So it's pretty old school, so it's been a while because I always use my automated version now. But anyways, yeah, so that's how you would do it. And maybe I should, it's like my Unreal Engine Brisbane meetup thing, I should actually just show you as well that it actually works. So put that in there. So, and I hope it works. Left, oops, sorry. We may need to restart the engine. Sorry, should put on the headset, not be lazy. But key thing here is after editing get my left hand, yep, is to restart the SteamVR input. But it seems like we're good to go here. So you can see the values there that I'm spitting out, as well as the thumbstick values are updating, right? So since I have it mapped the right hand, that doesn't work, right? So only the left hand works at the moment. But yeah, so that's how you could do the mapping. So you have to do that for each and every controller that you do support. So if you go back to SteamVR bindings, we've got a couple of controllers here, like the Oculus Touch and the Vive controllers. Your primary targets would be your most likely targets for your SteamVR experience. So you might want to change those these bindings here, or controller input profile binding files. Right, it's a mouthful. All right, and every time you change, so if I go back to project settings here, engine input, every time you change something here, it automatically adds that for you on the action manifest. Sorry, oops. Temp, where was it? Okay, so we have the temp live stream saved, config. It adds it to the SteamVR actions file. Okay. The problem is, of course, then you have to do that as well for the config SteamVR bindings Vive controller in here, and for every controller that you have. All right, so that's how you can mix and match the input, or bind the input to your UE4 actions. All right, so what happens if you get this fancy new controllers then with the knuckles, right? How do you, since the engine doesn't have, it looks like it did have it before Valve killed part of the API. So because if you look at it in here, if I type in knuckles, for example, it shows me nothing, which is a bit strange. Could have sworn it was maybe it's SteamVR. Let me look at SteamVR inputs. Okay, is that gone as well? Oh yeah, sorry. It doesn't show you once you enable the SteamVR input. There used to be like knuckles curl values in there. But since Valve killed that part of the API, you don't have knuckles support on this version of the engine, or it kind of looks like it doesn't have it. Simply because the way the input system works is very flexible. So you can add obviously any controller you want, you just have to define the JSON files for it. So how are we going to do that? So let's just do that here. Let's basically copy this for Vive controller. And I'm gonna change that to knuckles in there. And then just change that to, let's call that knuckles.json. Alrighty, so you have the, and then of course just copy that in, just call it knuckles.json. Oops, sorry, code knuckles.json, change the controller type to knuckles, right? And knuckles controllers, and the bindings should still be the same, right? Okay, just having a look, and that should be pretty much it. If I go back to controller input binding, no, and let me just close my Vibe ones if I can. For the right, and let me enable my knuckles controllers. If things don't behave as you expect it should, just restart SteamVR. I normally just restart SteamVR anyways, and the project, especially switching between controllers as well. You need to. All right, so let me just. But let's give it a go. Sometimes you get lucky. I don't think we'll get lucky on this one because you need to have the action manifest registered at the beginning. But yeah, so I kind of. Right, and if you go to here, so this action file actually gets loaded the project start, and you could see here now you've got this UE4 editor.exe. If you've started the project here by clicking this in Visual Studio, if it's a C++ project, you'd probably see something like UE4 editor-debug, something like that in there. All right, so we have, what has happened now is kind of mess things up. Just gonna close that down and quit this, just make sure things clean. And I don't know why those two are still there. I'm gonna nuke those if I can. All right, restart Steam as well. Technically, I don't even need Steam for this part, but Okay, that seems to be okay. All right, so we'll do, just gonna open SteamVR for now. Or should have just opened the project. One sec. Livestream. Sec. And I'm gonna open my Knuckles controller. I'm gonna move my headset around. Next time I'll set up a camera so you can see what I'm doing here. Got there. Alrighty, so what do we have? So I've got my Knuckles controller and my thing else. It's not. Alrighty, so I've only been using the left hand for now, so I'm just gonna try that in there. You could see I'm still running pretty well with it, even though I'm using the Knuckles now. And I guess just to prove the point that it's actually working because of that, let me just open up. Thank you. There it goes. Controller input binding. Gonna go to UE4 editor. And so now you see the Knuckles controllers are there. And it's mapped the same way as we've mapped the bindings for the Vive. So you can see it's quite relatively easy if you know where the files are, what the files do, and how to go about actually editing those files. So it takes a bit of practice, and yeah, a lot of trial and error when I first started this one, but you, once you get the hang of it, it's relatively easy, and it gets a lot easier after that. Right, and let me just go back to the article. Make sure I've covered stuff that I wanted to cover. So we've covered what Unreal does for you, what the engine does not do, which is create those automated bindings for the controller input profile binding files, and how we define those input to action mappings. Basically, I just showed you like a shortcut version of that, but using a debug controller. So just copying and pasting what you generate from the debug screen and putting it in there manually. And I've also showed you how to, if you've received your Knuckles dev kits yet, how you could add that in, and theoretically any other controller that you might have, any new controller, you could just add that in there. That's definition. And if I go back, maybe go down here a little bit, also looked at the haptics, how to enable those haptics, and these are the, how you're gonna do that. Sorry for the screenshot, I wanted to have this nice formatting, which Medium doesn't allow me to, but I did put, for all of these, this is actually taken from the SteamVR bindings that I have on my project Sunrock. Okay, so you could click that link there and see a sample of all of this, and you can just copy paste it or change it as you will. So if this is way too much stuff for you, there is too much fiddling for you, because you want to focus on your project rather than on how to put things together. You could wait for the official UE4 SteamVR plugin. It's currently being worked on by a couple of people from Valve and Epic. So I think the progress, there's a lot of progress happening in the back end for that, and I'm actually looking forward to testing that as well. So, and you could try out some of the plugins done by the community. So there's one, I understand there's one for Modern Troll from Joshua as well, Modern Troll, and he has, but I'm not sure if it's, I don't think he's publicly published it, so you might want to contact him if you want that. Or I've published mine, however, so the source code is under the MIT license, so you're free to copy it and change it as you will. And just gonna show you quickly. I initially created this for the as a live link plugin to do the animation. So that's why it's called Knuckles Live Link, and I just added in the input controller afterwards, simply because I've heard a lot of, I've got a lot of questions basically on how to use it. So, on how to use the SteamVR input, which is what I actually showed you, is not as straightforward as it should. So I've created something called Knuckles VR controller. So every bit of code here is MIT, so I've created those. The Knuckles VR controller, however, is based off the SteamVR controller inside the engine. So this is probably the only one that would be still under the Epic Games open source license. And I've also created in addition a Knuckles function library that allows you to use live link during runtime, or the live link skeletal animation stream for Knuckles during runtime. So you can grab that, and what that part of the control, sorry, a part of the plugin, this part here. What it does is this one, I've edited it so that it extended it basically to, first of all, yeah, give you all of these keys available so you can do your mappings. Internally, it doesn't really do much except just gives you in the drop down list the Knuckles. Maybe I should actually show you instead of talking about it. So open that and open Sunrock. So if you download Sunrock or clone it in GitHub, you should have a demo project in there. So the demo project is called Sunrock, a little bit of an homage to Moondust for the Unity version of this. And if you go to settings, project settings, engine input, so I've got all of my action mappings here. And what was I gonna show? And if I normally have my live link enabled here, and if I have Knuckles live link enabled, it should have a animation set up. Let me open up a skeleton. Let's use the left hand again. Where is it? Where are you? There. And if I do a preview scene, do a live link preview controller. What did I name it? Forgot. Subject is not. Where was it? So I got the VR gloves, and the subject name is. Where's my live link? Window gone. There. It's Knuckles animation. Just so I can preview it, and this is a good way to do a, you could see, enables that, and you could do your own mocaps, for example, of fingers here by just doing a record. So maybe take one frame doing this, one frame doing that, right? And then do a blend space, so you could do your own blend space animations. So you could see. Yeah, so that's one way you could use, one thing that the plugin does for you. And with Live Link as is, doesn't have a runtime. It does have a runtime component, but not for custom sources. So I've created, if I can find it, should be able to. Sorry, it's been a while since I've touched this part of the code. All right, so what is that? Debug. All right. So with the controller should be in begin play. I've created something called Knuckles Live Link Runtime, which connects you to the Knuckles source on the back end, on the C++ side. And basically what it does is it allows you to be able to use a skeletal animation during runtime, and you can package the project as well and it will work. So it's the power of that bit. And of course the main thing in terms of input is it does auto-generate all of these things for you. So if I open this one, for example, I didn't manually do that. All of those mappings are done automatically, and I should show you. So if I do, for example, a new one, let's go to settings, project settings, engine input. If I add a new action mapping, what do we call it? Let's call it teleport, not teleport. Sorry. Can't think of one. It's almost lunch here. All right, so let's do, could type Knuckles, and now you could see all of the Knuckles controllers that I've exposed that wasn't available earlier to you, as I've shown earlier in the live stream. So, what do we use? What have I exposed? Because motion controller stuff is already exposed, like the trigger. Okay, let's do a cap sense then from here. Let's call it cappy. And do Knuckles. So a cap sense. Alright, so you can see I've added cappy in there. Close that. And did I just close the... Alright, I'm just gonna open this up so you could see. And this one, Sunrock, saved, config, SteamVR actions here. Alright, so there shouldn't be any cappy here yet. Alright, so no results. There shouldn't be any cappy here. Yep. So once we restart the project, should just add those in for you, including the mappings. All right, so which it seemed to haven't for some reason. Let me double check if it's actually added those cappies in. It's odd. Just double check settings, project settings. Okay, add a new cappy. Okay. Hopefully I don't have a bug that I've just found out in the live stream. Unless I'm looking at it in the wrong, looking at the wrong stuff here, which is likely. Now, SteamVR actions should have it. Ah, there you go. So you got copy access in here. Not sure why the knuckles should have an equivalent one as well. I may have bug for the cap senses, because all of these were auto-generated for me. Okay. Bit sad. Like that. Let's open it up again. Let's see. Okay, and the files themselves should be config SteamVR bindings. Now it should have come up by now. Okay, alright, so that's good. At least I know I have to fix something, because Cappy didn't auto-generate here. That means all of my cap senses aren't working. Oh, sorry. Yeah, because a cap sense won't be a yeah, cap sense isn't a float, or it's in the vector 1. It's actually true or false, so I made a mistake there. That was my mistake. So let's do knuckles Cappy, a cap sense. Alright, so I would have actually just checked the code normally quickly, but let's do that. So now yeah, but still I should catch that from my code anyways, or once the official plugin, dang it, did I just open Livestream? Once the official one is out, I'm hoping they do the same thing, which is basically try to catch those common issues, because there's really no way of telling from within the from within here which one should be which. So if I was gonna create a modification on my plugin, for example, for here, I'll only allow stuff to come up here if they are actually for access mappings, which I should have done, but apparently not. Alright, so we have, but it's causing me some grief here. Still not. Let me use something else. Okay. Edit engine input. Let me map that to, is this mine? Let me see. Let me map that to the trigger, for example. Right, so. Okay, we just open Sunrock. That's interesting. Oh, sorry. Okay, so need to be able to force regenerate the let's force regenerate it. So I've just deleted the whole thing, but it should have been an M place, but let's see. If I'm just not generating it properly. Unless the version I have online is completely messed up, but yeah, there it is. So, all right, sorry about that. So, from memory, I could have sworn I was doing it as an M place, but I guess I'm having to regenerate it. So, let me just close this so I don't keep opening it. The action manifest here is an M place, so it will be an additive. So if you add that, the engine will just add stuff into it. If you add stuff to the actions, the actual controller input profiles themselves, you need to delete this SteamVR bindings. With this current version, you're gonna have to fix that. Delete the SteamVR bindings, and it will auto-generate everything for you, and then restart your project. And what it does is it will add that in. So if you recall, engine input, CAPI, motion controller left trigger, I've added that action mapping in there. And normally with just a base engine, it doesn't do this for you. So the plugin will do that for you. That mapping in there without a lot of copying and pasting and trying to figure out what those paths are. So you could see it's added that in there. So SteamVR input system automatically adds it. So that's pretty much all similar to how the Unity version of the plugin is doing. So with obviously Unity doesn't have this type of interface, but it was added afterwards. But here the engine is just hooking up to this, and the missing bit, in my opinion, from the official Epic implementation is, at least for the input system, is this, along with, of course, no support for knuckles when you enable SteamVR input. So, and then you have to manually add knuckles. So the Sunrock plugin does add that for you as well. So it will add these knuckles controller keys. It will generate the action manifest with knuckles, with a link up to the knuckles controllers. So here, config, saved, config, this one. So it adds, where is that? I've added it at the beginning, yep. So it adds that in there. As you saw earlier in the live stream, we had to add that manually, or for any new, I guess for any new controllers as well, you would have to do that. And then these ones are always auto-generated by the engine, which is nice. The missing bit, of course, is a very huge one, which is the actual mappings, which maps to this controller here. To figure out the paths, you do that here, right? And if you want to see how it looks like, or how it generates it, you could find that here, right? So there's several ways of creating it, but if you just want to enable the SteamVR input and get up and go, yeah, use some of the available plugins out there. So you could try out Sunrock for one, right? And the only thing I guess that's different from what I've shown you here is you don't need to enable. Once you've put in the plugin, just make sure you're not enabling this bit. You're not enabling the SteamVR input here, like I did at the beginning of the live stream. So you don't need that, because the assumption is obviously if you're gonna put the plugin in there, is that you want the SteamVR input system to be active. All right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover in this live stream. So roughly an hour. So what we did was we've done that. What we've done, sorry about that. Yep, so I've done the bit of a quick start on how to actually enable the plugin. So by changing the your project into using Unreal's input abstraction, and then enabling the SteamVR input system via the default engine.ini. Then I've covered what Unreal does, which is basically create the action manifest for you, as well as empty stubs for all of the controller profiles that it is aware of. And then I've shown you how you could possibly define your input to action mappings manually. So some tricks there for using the debugger and just copying and pasting files. And I've also covered a little bit on Project Sunrock, which practically automates all of these parts here for you. As long as you use the engine abstraction here, the plugin, the Project Sunrock will automate everything else that I've discussed at the beginning of the live stream. And of course enables you to kind of map. It exposes the SteamVR Knuckles stuff in here. All right, which is available by default with the engine. All right, and if you want to see or change it, it is, or you're not happy with the implementation, it is all open source and MIT licensed. So feel free to just grab it in there. You can see 3 modules, live link editor. That's for the skeletal animation that I've shown earlier. And this is the VR controller, which is the only one that's not MIT licensed, because it was derived from code from Epic. So from the engine code, so I can't MIT license that. So yeah, but feel free. But obviously a way over that, if you want to open source something or MIT license it, I could have also created my own input controller, which would have taken me a bit longer. And then, but yeah, what you can do is grab this copy, then diff it with the engine copy. Let me see if I can show you where did I put my engine. Should have it in GitHub. So you could obviously, I'm just gonna wait for that to open. You could obviously change stuff in the engine, but where was that? SteamVR. So yeah, so you can see, let me just open up so that piece of code is actually derived from here, which is a SteamVR controller, and I called it Knuckles controller, Knuckles VR controller. So what you could do is you could diff these files that came with the engine versus the file that I have here, because this one I've brought it down to the project level so most people could use it without having to change engine code. But if you're an advanced user of Unreal or developer of Unreal and you want to fiddle around with the code, you could just grab this, do a diff, and see what changes I've done. You could easily create your own input controller, so that's also relatively trivial. You could do that and then just pick and choose the stuff that you want added and just see how I've implemented the automation of the bindings, which is basically just filling in, reading what's out in the action mappings here. Basically, I'm reading engine input here and then hooking up to the auto generation of the action manifest and then extending that to further create the controller input binding files and then actually create those mappings for you. It's not an easy task because there's so many variations and so many stuff that you could do with this very powerful, Valve's very powerful SteamVR input system. So it does take quite a bit of dedication to create something for that if you want to automate it. So you could use mine as a starting point if you want, and then just extend it. There is, and you could use as well, I've basically structured the way I'm explaining stuff in here in the hopes that it will be useful for another developer and then to help me with this one. But I guess with the official one it doesn't need to be extended further, but if it doesn't get extended anytime soon, so feel free to have a read at this and see how the structure, so I've tried to put in the structure as I understood it from all of the documentation and just by trial and error and looking at how it behaves. So, and then just an explanation of all of those stuff. And with this info, you could basically use it as a reference to create your own tools if you wanted to, or extend what I've already created here. So yeah, which I will extend if there's still no official support coming up soon, but I believe it should come up soon, the official one. And I'm hoping then I can focus on the skeletal animation for the live link one, which I believe Epic might also be adding in 4.22. Let's see how it goes. So anyways, I've babbled long enough about it. So have a go, have a look at the engine code, have a look at the Sunrock code if you want to delve into it deeper, or if you just want to use it. Yeah, of course, feel free to manually just copy paste stuff as I've shown you in the live stream. So hope it's useful. All right, cheers folks, and see you soon.